Bhagavad Gita describes such a spiritual warrior, you could say. He remains ever centered, calmly in the self, Sri Krishna tells us, unaffected personally by joy or sorrow, praise or blame, appraising equally a clod of earth, a stone, and gold. He doesn't distinguish among others according to whether they treat him well or badly, uninfluenced by honor or dishonor, equally gracious toward friend and foe, free from any motivation of personal ambition. These signs accompany one who has transcended the three qualities of nature. And the Gita goes on a few lines later to say that the way to be strong in yourself, to be unaffected, is to serve God with undeviating love and devotion, Krishna tells us. Not just loving God, but actively, dynamically serving God, and serving God within others. It's said that the exact moment that the Buddha was enlightened, that all of humanity was uplifted in some subtle way. There was a woman who had a lot of sadness, and she was washing clothes in the river. And in that moment, her sadness was lifted. A husband and wife were arguing, and in that moment, they became silent. At Diwali, we celebrate the victory of Ram over Ravana, of light over darkness, of good over evil. And we're uplifted. All of humanity is uplifted just by the presence of Ram, just by his vibration, just as Buddha's enlightenment uplifted all of humanity. As Yogananda said, darkness may reign in a cave for thousands of years, but bring in the light, and the darkness vanishes as though it had never been. And more importantly, Ram's victory is symbolic of our own inner battle with darkness and the courage that it takes to fight that inner Ravan. And it's not enough just to be inspired by Ram. We must also make our own self-effort. Swami Kriyanandaji said, victory demands courage of conviction, knowing what we really want and sticking to it. Growing up, I was confused and certainly did not have that conviction. And all children sort of imitate others until they find their own way. But perhaps I was extreme and a bit of a chameleon, or maybe I lived many past lives in one life. But I remember having a friend who was an accomplished artist as a child, and I was perfectly content to spend the afternoon while he painted. I would work on my own painting. And then I got a new friend, and he liked to run cross country. And so somehow I forgot all about art, and I would run cross country with him. And then I had another friend who was a bit of a rebel, and by following him without discrimination, I got into all sorts of trouble. And even when I was older, even in college, I remember one of my friends was Jewish. And then all of his friends became my friends. And I started to go to all the Jewish holidays. And then one day I got ill in bed for a couple of weeks, and I was forced to introspect. And I realized that I was not happy, that my life really didn't have a direction. But it took the fact that I had to reflect. I had to stop. That was what it took for me to gain the courage to make a decision and to make a change. And from that time, I started meditating. And gradually I developed devotion, and gradually a life of serving God, as Krishna directs us to. And just through these simple actions, new friends would come to me who were meditators without my even seeking them. And this courage of conviction and serving God create their own magnetism that draws the right things to us. And once later in life, I recall that I was again confused by conflicting duties, and I wrote to Swamiji and asked him what I should do. And he didn't tell me what to do. Instead, he sent me a list of questions. And these questions made me stop the problem racing in my mind. And he asked me to focus on what were the important things to me, what were my ideals, what did I really want the most. And when I stopped and focused on what I really wanted, again, I remembered what those ideals really were. They became very clear in my mind. Then it was easy to know exactly what the right thing was to do. I just had to come back to that inner stillness, and the decision was easy. And in the spiritual life, our power comes from this courage of conviction, of knowing what it is that we really want, and just sticking to it. Be kindly, give love, love everyone, but we don't need to go away from our spiritual flow to join the worldly flow of others. When we're strong in ourselves like that, then we can be more dynamic, we can be more loving, we can be more compassionate, because we come from a place of inner strength. And through meditation, we're centered in ourselves, and we don't allow anything to disturb that inner calm. Swamiji would say near the end of his life, he would say, life is so blissful. The more you give your life to God, the more thrilling life is. Appreciation and gratitude are the main attitudes we should have toward life.
This week's reading, which Keshavaji referred to from the book Rays of the One Light, victory demands the courage of conviction. And he read that passage from the Gita. And I want to read the passage of, the parallel passage that Christ from the Bible says. And it goes, Jesus Christ said in the Gospel of Saint Matthew, chapter 10, "Think not that I am come to send peace on earth. I came not to send peace, but a sword. For I am come to set a man at variance against his father, and the daughter against her mother, and the daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's foes shall be they of his own household. He that loveth father or mother more than me is not worthy of me, and he that loveth son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he that taketh not his cross and followeth after me is not worthy of me. He that findeth, that is to say, that clingeth to his life, shall lose it. And he that loseth, in other words, that gives up his life for my sake, shall find it." And just briefly reading what Swami says here. He says, God tests the firmness of our faith. The sword described here is the sword of discrimination. The struggle Jesus describes is not a war against unknown enemies, but the struggle with our own attachment to all that is nearest and dearest to us, humanly speaking. Ultimately, it is a war against the ego itself and against anything with which we surround ourselves to bolster the ego's fragile sense of security. So very interesting reading, grim on one level. I was like, why did it come to me to talk of this? But as I was thinking of especially that one phrase, he that loves father or mother more than me, he who loves son or daughter more than me, is not worthy of me. And I began to think about, what kind of love God is talking about. And all of us, as we go through life, we have relations, we have families, our sister, our brother, our spouse, our mother, our father. And often, people say, how do we talk about this detachment? How do you love them, but at the same time be detached? And Christ is saying, love me more than you love them. And how do we do this? And I often think, I remind myself, and this might seem like a strange fact, but it is true. And think about it, that in all our lives, maybe thousands of lives that we probably more have lived as human beings, in each of them we have had brothers and sisters and fathers and mothers and husbands and wives. And most probably they have all been different. Isn't it true? It seems like, oh, what is that? But it is true. And it is important to remember that, because when we are so focused on just this one life, and, with our relations, this is my sister and I love her and I especially love her, or this is my mother and I especially love her, which is fine. But just go back even one life and think in your past life, you had somebody else, a completely different soul who was playing the part of your mother, your sister, your brother, whatever it might be. And the life before that, and the life before that. And if we introspect, we will realize that what is the point of all this? I feel a little strange with this realization. But the point is that it was never meant to be about a person, about a personality. Because these countless souls have played this same role for us in our different lives. the point, like Christ is saying, is for us to realize who has been the lover behind all of those roles, Who is it? Who is behind all of those? And if we can realize that it has been God. It has been Divine Mother in each of those forms, trying to guide me, trying to love me, then it becomes easy. Then that detachment comes very easily, because you see, even now, Divine Mother in my life, whoever it is, it's just you, and maybe it'll be someone else in the future. And so we can understand that kind of divine love, rather than this sometimes very personal love, which can limit our growth. I also have observed, and I think this is true, that when we love something more than God, which is what Christ is saying, and if we have given our lives to God, which is, as truth seekers, as devotees, many of us have given our lives to God, to Guru, I have found that when we do that, sometimes God will take away those things that we love more than Him. Or He might test if we are willing to give up those things. And that's why Swami says it takes that firmness, that conviction sometimes. Nayaswami Devi, often recounts this story that when she first came to Ananda village, everyone in the community had their simple homes, and she and Jyotishi had just had their, son who was 10 days old, and suddenly this forest fire came, it ravaged through the community, and she said, our house burned down. And she said, suddenly I found myself on the meadow with my 10-year-old baby, no roof over my head, the whole community gone, and, one might be like, what just happened? Why did God do that? She was such a sweet devotee, so sincere. And even Swami Kriyananda's life, if you study it, if you think about it, he just had the most amazing things taken away from him. When he was expelled, from Self-Realization Fellowship, overnight, his sense of security, all his friends, his name, his financial security, his credibility, his Guru Bhais, everything was taken away from him. Not really, I don't think, because he loved them more than God, because very soon after, he just said, if you want Divine Mother to take everything, do that. And he was able to pass through that test. But I often think, all of us really are in this lineage, and we are trying to follow in the footsteps of these souls. So I think we better kind of expect that these sort of things might very well just come to us. And, just having that courage to know that and to affirm that God, Divine Mother, I love you. And no matter what you send or take away, my love remains unmoving. That is what Christ was saying. And I was thinking, how do we respond to something like that? And if God, like I said, if we love something more than the divine and God takes it away, well, I say you make the first move. Rather than waiting that some twist of fate comes and it takes that thing away, I say, let's make the first move and let's willingly offer, in our minds, just realize, what is it that I perhaps love more than God? And in our minds, just say, God, I give it back to you. And one very practical thing that happens when we do that is that when we do it ourselves, there can be a lot of joy. There can be a joyful offering that I see it's you, this was already yours, I give it back to you. But if, we wait, and if sometimes, we take our time and circumstances force something to go out of our hand or take something away, then it's painful, isn't it? Because it's painful for the ego to, have that. So make the first move. Don't give God a chance to even ask us that question, and make that first move. And so let's think for a moment. In our minds, is there something, and it's okay, that I love more than God? Christ didn't say, don't love. He said, don't love anything more than me. So it's okay to love, all the things and all the people, because there is goodness, there is the divine in everything around us. But in our minds, just mentally for a few minutes, let's see, is there anything that we perhaps right now love more than God? And maybe let's start with our name, our self-image, this perception. Do we love ourselves? What people think of us, like Keshavaji was reading, praise or blame. Whether people say good things to us, they say terrible things to us. Do we love ourselves more, or do we love God more? And visualize for a moment, if that is our particular challenge, that see someone slandering you, see someone despising you, and in the face of it, can you say, I'm totally okay with that? And not in a vengeful way, but saying, God, you can do whatever, my name can go to mud, as they say, but I have love in my heart for you, and I will be fine. And then security, whether it's wealth or whether it's other symbols of security that all of us happen to have in our lives. Again, think, like Devi ji, what if next week, the house we own, perhaps something happens and it's no longer there? Do we still have the courage to say, you gave it to me in the first place, you take it away, that is all the same to me? What if all our wealth just gets wiped out in a moment? And can we still say, I am okay with it, Lord, because you are my wealth. You have been the one. I came into this world empty. I didn't have a single penny to my name. This house was not in my name, whatever it might be. And I give it back to you. Having that kind of love which is greater than even the things that surround us. And finally, people, because that is often a challenge for most of us. Do we love someone more than God? And again, very frankly, if that is the case right now, that's totally fine. But again, with that understanding that who is it in that person really that we feel that love for? And if we can bring ourselves to realize that, then it won't be so difficult, And also testing, that let's say we love our child, we love our son, we love our daughter, which is great. But can you love your neighbor's child as deeply as we love our own? Because if we can, then that is proving that we are trying to expand that love to everyone. Can we love, someone else's father, someone else's mother with the same reverence that we treat our own parents, strangers? That is again the test of that love. And finally, even these bodies, Swami Kriyananda said, we perhaps think of ourselves as these persons having these bodies. And, I often think to myself right now, even as I'm moving my hands, as I'm speaking, I have no clue how it's all working. I don't know, I'm not telling my brain, move these arms, make sure the thought comes first, and then the word comes, and then the sound comes. We have no idea. I don't know how the breath is flowing in me right now. And remembering again and again that it is all the divine, it is all God, and we just have to forget ourselves and say, it's all you. Whether you give me things, whether you take away things, whether you love me through others, whether, what is due to me is not given to me, everything is fine, but I love you more than everything. And when we can do that, we have reached that stage, and it's a beautiful feeling to experience. So finally, I also want to wish you a happy Diwali. But this I was thinking last evening, often when Diwali comes or a festival comes, people send each other messages, on WhatsApp. Sometimes people say, wish you success and prosperity and abundance and wealth and good health and all of these things. And I was thinking to myself last night, I wish none of you have that. And you must feel like, what? What a strange blessing, he's cursing us. But no, because I really thought, one, I wouldn't even wish that for myself. Because if you think for a moment, what is the point of any of that? If having all of those, we don't have remembrance of God. If having those perhaps become impediments, and we forget that love of God. We forget to love like Christ said. We forget with success, with good health, with abundance, with wealth. So rather I want to wish you with a different kind of success. The success, really the greatest success with which you can draw a response from God. That's great success. That's the greatest success. I think Christ agrees, maybe. And wealth. What is wealth? What is material wealth? It could all go, but if you have within your heart that kind of feeling which says, you are my wealth, you can take everything away, but I know that you are the giver, and you can give me anything. As it says in the Autobiography, the one who has given us air and milk from our first breath knows how to take care of his devotee from day to day. So that kind of prosperity, that kind of abundance. Health, yes, good health, but not just, to have good health for the sake of it, so that we can become channels. We can use that health, body, mind and soul, to serve, like Keshava is saying, the Guru, to serve God. And so everything is fine, but never forgetting that do we love these things more than God, or do we love them for themselves? So wish you all a very, very blessed Diwali, and I hope we can all really in this season grow in this greatest of treasures, the grace of God, the ability to love God more than everything, and at the back of our mind we're always saying, you alone. I want only you. Any blessing.